Well, hey everybody, welcome to North Shore. It is really good to see those of you who are in this room, and I just want to say hi to everybody who's joining us online. We're so glad you are with us. Wherever in the world you're watching from, it is good to be gathered together. It's good to be here. And as you know, we are 2 weeks away from Easter Sunday, which is the day we celebrate the reason we are here. The reason the church exists is because 2,000 years ago, Jesus walked out of a tomb. That's why we're here. That's what this is about. In fact, that's the reason why billions of people for 2,000 years have put their faith in this man named Jesus, given their lives for him. It's because they heard and believed this one story. And so I want to challenge all of us sometime in the next 2 weeks. I want to challenge you to invite at least one person to join you at Easter, whether it's in this room or to join you online. You can just ask them, hey, do you want to come to church on Easter with me or our family? And we have actually in the lobby these great little invite cards. You can just write a little note, invite somebody. It's a great way to ask them to be part of Easter. I'm telling you, it's going to be a powerful service. I've been praying about it. I'm so excited about it. But can we commit together to invite just one person? Can we do that? Okay, 6 of you are going to do that. The rest of you are going to have to take it up with Jesus. Can we do that, everybody? Let's do that. One person. It's going to be an amazing time. Our world needs to be reminded that the victory's already been won. It's already been won. So just to jump into the message, I want to start with kind of a personal question, but it's an important one, and it's simply this. What do you love most in life? What do you love most in life? What's, out of all the people or things that you treasure, what's the most central, most important, most I can't live without part of your life? Just think about that. Maybe for you, it's a relationship, or maybe your spouse. Maybe for you, it's kids or your family. I know a lot of people have been able to see family over the past few months for the first time after a long season of separation in the pandemic, and it was just so sweet to see people that we loved or they loved. Or maybe you realized you preferred seeing them on Zoom, and you're kind of that person. It kind of goes either way, right? You never know with family. Maybe for you, the most important thing is your work, or your career, or success, or achievement in some way. Maybe for you, it's your appearance, or what people think of you or think about you. Maybe for you, what's most important is just being in control. A lot of people in these days, especially in the last couple of years, just feeling that need to be in control. I'm one of those people. When I was single, I loved my independence. I loved being able to do what I want, when I wanted, kind of how I wanted. Then I got married, and I love my wife, Nina, but I also discovered how much I still loved being in control and doing what I want, when I wanted, and how I wanted. So that led to some conversations along the way. And then I became a dad, and I love my kids. And yet I can get so frustrated and irritated and impatient because I still love being in control. Anyone notice a pattern at work in my life here? Yeah? So what do you love most? What's at the center of your life? And to help you answer this question, sometimes it helps me kind of see kind of the different categories or areas or levels of concerns that we have. So I want to walk through kind of 3 categories of concerns that we will kind of live with in our lives. And the first category is what I would call the peripheral concerns. These are your everyday concerns, household chores, to-do lists, like the stuff that has to get done, the car that has to get fixed, the bills that have to get paid, the dog has to get fed, the cat has to get rehomed. It's a cat, they need to be rehomed, send them somewhere else. These are just the everyday concerns of our lives, the stuff that we kind of have to take care of. But then there's a next level of concerns, what I would call primary concerns. These are the primary, more central concerns of life, relationships, family, safety, career, financial concerns. These are kind of primary concerns. And by the way, and you'll know this, so much of our anxiety and conflict in life comes trying to figure out what goes in each of these 2 categories, right? Maybe you and your spouse, if you're in a relationship, have had a conversation about spending time with extended family. And one of you thinks that's a primary concern. The other person thinks that's a peripheral concern. And the result is what? Conflict. And some of you are doing this, you're nodding, you know it, you're in there right now. And honestly, so much of life and it could figure that out. I could spend hours just working through these 2 things, but here's the bad news. That's not today's message, so we'll do that another time, because there's a third area of concern right in the center of all this, and it's simply what matters most. what matters most to you? Everybody has something at the center. Everybody, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you know what it is or not, everybody has something in the center of their life. And here's the more important thing. What you put here in the center will determine how you arrange everything else. If money is in the center, then things like prioritizing relationships or people can easily drift to the periphery because money is what matters most. If comfort is at the center of your life, if comfort is what matters most to you, then taking risks or taking on new challenges can drift to the periphery because comfort is what matters most. Everybody has something at the center, and what you put at the center will determine how you arrange everything else. And here's what else is important. This is mostly for those of you who would call yourself a follower of Jesus or a person of faith. Just because you go to church or just because you say you believe in God doesn't mean God is at the center of your life. I mean, there are people who go to church every week or who say that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that God is what's in the center. What's in the center of your life is based on your what matters most to you, what you look to for security, what you feel like you can't live without. And a lot of those things can be things that are other than God, right? Relational fulfillment, or vocational success, or financial security can easily find their way in the center, even if you're a person that gathers on Sunday and sings worship songs and believes inside, I have these beliefs in God, but that doesn't automatically mean that God is at the center. Because here's the thing, you can only have one thing at the center, and what you put there determines how free you're gonna be. And that's what today's message is all about. As you know, we've been in this series kind of walking through the Old Testament book of Exodus called Set Free, and it's all about how to learn how to live in light of the freedom God gives us and how God can set us free from the stuff that holds us in bondage. And we've seen over the past few weeks in particular how Israel has been wandering through the wilderness, learning to depend on God like one day at a time. And they've been confronted by their enemies, like the ones we saw last week, the Amalekites. And then in the story, if you keep reading, they come to this mountain called Sinai. And they camp there at the foot of the mountain. And God calls Moses, who's been leading them through the wilderness, to go up on top of the mountain. And on that mountain, God gave Moses this incredible gift. He gave him what the Israelites called the Torah, or the law. And this is how the law begins. This is kind of our primary text for the day. Exodus chapter 20, verse 2, or 1 and 2 says this. And God spoke all these words. And then, of course, beyond this, there's going to be chapters of this law that he gives. But this is how it begins. He says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, as many of you know, this right here, this last statement is the first of the 10 commandments. Many of you, whether you're a church person or not, you've heard of the 10 commandments. By the way, any guesses on how many actual commandments are in the 10 commandments? Anyone know? There's 10. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a trick question. There's just 10. It's in the title. I know it's early. It feels early. There's just 10. Sorry, that was kind of a cruel little joke. Of course, the 10 commandments, you've heard of these. You've seen them listed. They're kind of these kind of basic rules of life, so to speak. And we can see them often as that, just a list of rules that we're supposed to do so that God stays happy with us, right? But just so you know, for Israel, these weren't just a list of abstract rules they were supposed to follow so that God would be happy with them. They saw the Torah as life-giving. It was a way of life that kept them free. So it was this beautiful thing that they valued, they treasured. It was something that kept them free, which I know it sounds counterintuitive in our day, doesn't it? I mean, in our day, we tend to think of freedom as the absence of rules, right? You know, less rules, more freedom. That's how we just tend to think. But the opposite is actually true. The absence of rules isn't freedom, it's actually chaos. I mean, just think about what it would be like, just for example, think about what it would be like if you were driving a car on the road, but there were 0 rules. Like not even one. Like you could drive as fast as you want, whenever you wanted, however you wanted. Something like going like, I'd love to do that. Can we do that? Can I sign up for that, right? You could go on either side of the road, whether the lane you wanted. You could speed through a red light or stop at a green light. You could drive however you wanted, no rules, just you behind the wheel. Now imagine you doing that with all the other cars on the road doing that at the same time. It's not freedom, it's chaos and lots of crashes, right? And by the way, I see something like this play out all the time at our home. Our kids have one of those miniature electric cars. They drive around. Here's a picture of them on our street. I think we will show you. Yep, there's our two kids driving around in the cold in their little car. By the way, don't let their cuteness fool you. They are dangerous, right? They will drive down the wrong side of the road and up onto the sidewalk and across the yard and, oh, there's the dog, let's run over the dog. Like they will go like there's no rules. And there's a ton of fear in my heart when that's happening, right? Freedom isn't the absence of rules or guidelines. Freedom is a way of life. It's a guided way of life that allows everyone to drive and not crash. That's freedom. Which is why driving requires a Torah, if you will, a collection of commands and guidelines that you must follow, or an officer of the Torah will pull you over and write you a citation. Even if you're a pastor on your way to church, he will still write you a citation. I can tell you it's happened to me. And here's the deal. The freedom to drive requires a way of driving. And this is true in every part of life, friends. It's true when it comes to financial life or money. It's true when it comes to sex life or sexuality. It's true when it comes to relationships or ambition. We need a way of life in order to be free. Not just, I get to do what I want, absence of rules. That's not freedom. That's chaos. We need a way of life that keeps us free. And that's what the law that God gave Israel was all about. And it begins with a declaration not of rules, but of grace. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery, who brought you out of Egypt. That's a statement of grace. I'm your God. I've chosen you. I've called you. I've saved you. I've redeemed you out of my grace. Therefore, you shall have no other gods before me. That's the first commandment. And by the way, that's the most repeated commandment in all of the Old Testament law. No other gods, no other gods, no other gods, no other gods. And my question, simple, why? Like, why is this like the most important or the first commandment or the most fundamental commandment? Like, why is this such a big deal to God? I mean, is it because he's jealous? Does he like desperately need our attention and our worship? Is he so insecure that he wants us just to constantly focus on him? More importantly, this command doesn't even seem that relevant in our world today. I can tell you in my own life, I don't wake up in the morning feeling like worshiping other gods is my primary problem. I've got a number of problems that doesn't feel like the one. To me, it feels like an ancient problem that was for ancient cultures that would worship actual idols and statues. And by the way, you can find lots of this in the Bible. If you read through the Bible, lots of examples of Israel falling into worship of these other idols and statues. Just walk through a couple of them. One of the prominent idols or gods in the ancient world was this god, this picture of this god. This was the god Baal. Baal was a Mesopotamian god who was worshiped by many different Canaanite kind of cultures. He was the god of weather, of rain, of dew, and of seasonal affective disorder if you live in this part of the world, right? And they would worship this god Baal. There's another god, a Babylonian god that was prominent in the time when Israel was in exile in Babylon. This is the god Marduk. And Marduk was a god of justice and compassion in Babylon. By the way, Marduk was also the god of accounting. So if you had problems with your taxes in Babylon, this was like your god. Like this was like your go-to god if that was your problem. Israel, remember, was in Egypt. One of the prominent gods back in Egypt was this god named Horus. And Horus was a different looking god. Horus was actually, a god of hunting and warfare, but he was actually a human being body with a bird's head. And by the way, people in this part of the world still worship this god. I'm telling you right now, we still worship a god just like this. Take a look at this. See, we still, no other gods, people, no other gods. I'm just telling you, I know you don't like that, but no other gods, okay? And these kinds of idols, these kind of statues or images were common in the ancient world. They were also common in the first century. If you remember, the Apostle Paul, when he was planting churches, arrived in a city called Athens. And the text in Acts says that he was distraught. He was frustrated because the city was full of idols, it says. Full of idols. So it's easy to dismiss this first commandment as not really relevant to us because it seems more applicable to ancient cultures or pagan people who worship these images or idols or statues. But here's the truth about this, which I want you to hear. The truth is, our world is just as filled as idols as the ancient one. Our idols just look a little different. We don't kneel before Aphrodite, but we are just as obsessed with beauty and body image. Maybe more so. I mean, think of the level of anxiety and depression, particularly in kids and young people, at what they look like or how they present themselves on social media. We don't practice child sacrifice in our day, but think of the experience of neglect that children will feel if their parents worship the God of success or achievement. We don't burn incense to a God of fertility, but we will burn our lives down chasing pleasure or sexual gratification. See, we don't worship in little shrines or sanctuary like they did. Our worship takes place not actually as much in places like this. Our worship takes place in offices and gyms and shopping centers and social media feeds to gods like power or pleasure or popularity. You see, an idol isn't a little image or statue. It's anything you put at the center of your life other than God. It's anything that you think anything that you think can give you what only God can give you. And our idols, just so you know, they don't live out there. They live in here. Ezekiel 14:3, God says about Israel and their leaders that they had set up idols in their hearts, he says. And we do the same thing. Which is why, and this hopefully will make sense now, this is why the first commandment isn't do not sin. And wouldn't you think that would be the first commandment? Like, do not sin, like don't do bad things. I mean, I grew up kind of believing that's gotta be the fundamental basic thing. Like whatever else happens, just don't do the wrong things. But here's the problem with that. You can focus all you want on your behavior and miss what's actually happening in your heart, which is why the first command isn't do not sin, it's no other gods, no other gods, no other gods. Because you only have one thing at the center of your life. And by the way, the enemy would happily let you go to church every week, hear a message, go back into your week, and keep struggling to get your behavior right if you'll leave the idol inside alone. He would happily let you pour all the energy you want into all sorts of religious activity just to try to get all the behaviors right, as long as that means you leave the idol alone, because God knows it's the idol that's killing you. It's the idol that you're in bondage to. It's the idol that at the end of the day is gonna let you down. Idolatry, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like drinking salt water. Like it looks right. I mean, it sure looks like it's gonna help, but it only makes you more thirsty. Which is why God makes this commandment number one, because we are made in such a way that only a personal, daily, loving relationship with God can fill us and fulfill us. Only God can do that. At the center of your life, it's not God and, it's God only. Which is why that nagging discontent or disappointment doesn't go away no matter how much money you have or success you achieve or admiration you accrue. You are made to be satisfied by God and God alone. Which leads to this really simple question. Why then do we fall for these lesser gods? Like, why do we fall for these other idols? Like, why do we fall for these other pursuits if they only let us down? Well, one of the main reasons, it's actually a very practical thing. One of the main reasons is we're just impatient. We're impatient. When God doesn't show up on our timeline, we turn to something more immediate, more tangible. You know, God, I don't feel like waiting for you to help me with my anxiety, so I'll drink or shop or gossip to get instant relief. Like that'll make me feel better. God, I don't feel like waiting for someone I can marry or commit my life to, so I'll just sleep around or I'll indulge online just so I can get a little instant pleasure in my life. We don't trust God enough to wait, so we turn to an idol. And by the way, there's a great picture of this in the Old Testament, the Exodus story, just a little later in the story. While Moses was still up on Sinai, the people of God, the Israelites, got very impatient. They didn't know where he was. Look what happens. This is from Exodus 32. Text says, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, like he's been up there a while, like where is this guy? They gathered around Aaron and said, come, make us gods who will go before us. As this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. By the way, I love this line, like this fellow Moses, like they don't even really know who he is. Like it's the guy who brought them out of Egypt. This fellow Moses, this strange guy, he's on the mountain somewhere. We don't know where he's at. Like we need somebody else. And so they do what? They build a golden calf to worship. Why? Because God is taking too long. So here's a question for you. What have you turned to in your life because God is taking too long? What are you depending on because it's too hard to trust God? The struggle's too great, the pressure's too great, the stress is too great, the worry's too great, so you've got to turn to something more tangible and immediate. What is it for you? And I thought today we could actually do kind of a deep dive, like a little exercise to help us discern and diagnose, like what are actually the idols in our lives? Because they can be kind of hidden for us. Like we don't have golden calves typically that we go after and worship. So what are the actual idols in our lives? So we're gonna do a little exercise together. I got this idea from a friend of mine who's a pastor. It's called an IQ test. And no, it's not about your intelligence quotient. This is about your idolatry quotient. So there's a card in the seat in front of you like this. Everybody grab it. Seat in front of you or the seat right here, it's on the seat. If you're online, you actually just take a piece of paper or a pen. You can do this real simple with a pen and some blanks. Everybody grab this card and a pen. Everybody grab the card and a pen, you'll need it. And we're just gonna go through and I'm gonna give you some possible potential idols. You're gonna write them down, and then afterwards I'm gonna ask you some questions about those just to help you discern what your IQ, your idolatry quotient might be. So everybody ready? First blank, here's the word I want you to write. First blank, write the word money. Just write the word money in blank number 1. And no, not because money is a bad thing or an evil thing, but the love of money, the eagerness for money, the obsession with money can be. So just write the word money in blank number 1. Okay? Second blank, write this word down. Write the word success. Success. This isn't just a temptation for business people or leaders, parents, students, anybody. A resume can be an idol for anybody. Success. Blank number 3, write this word down. Write the word control. Control. Parents can fall into this one big time, right? Teenagers can fall into this one. Parents of teenagers can really fall into this one. Write the word control. That's blank 3. Number 4, write this word. Write the word comfort. Oh, how we love our comfort. And for some people deep down, this is actually at the deep center of your life. And that you would walk away from God if it meant being uncomfortable. Next blank, write this word. Write the word beauty. Beauty. I mean, how many filters does it take? What kind of lighting do I need to attain the level of attractiveness that I want? Beauty. Next blank, write this word. Write the word work. Work. People give their lives away for this all the time, and not just occupational work. It could be parenting work or recreational work. What you spend your life pouring into, what work you do. Let's write the word work. Number 7, how about this one? Write this word. Write the word approval. Everyone write the word approval. You live for the approval of others, whether it's likes on social media or the constant affirmation you might need from someone in your life. Number 8, this might be a surprise, but I think it's a real one. Write this word in number 8. Write the word politics. Kind of a growing idol in our day. People whose political allegiance or loyalty is getting stronger and deeper. Write the word politics. Here's another one you might not expect, but it's a real one. But write this word down. Write the word spirituality. Or religion, if you want to use that word. Spirituality. The Pharisees were this way. Their religious appearance or spirituality, following the rules was their God. Doing the right things was their God. Not knowing God or loving God, but just doing the right stuff. And people in churches all the time fall into this one. Then when there's one last blank, number 10, I want you to take, this one is just for you to fill out. Whatever else might be an idol for you, just write something else that may have come to mind for you. Could be intelligence, independence, pain. Did you know that pain or a struggle can be an idol? After the last service, someone came up to me after service and said, you know what I wrote in that blank? I just wrote the word me. What a great one. Because of course, that's one for me too. So write whatever else could be in number 10. Everybody finished? Everybody ready? So now I'm gonna ask you some questions that are about this list, and I want you to check whatever idols, all of them, if it's all 10, whatever idols apply to the question I ask you, okay? So just check any and all that apply as we go. And some will have more than one check as we do this, okay? First question. Which of these idols do you find yourself thinking all the time about? What do you find yourself thinking about all the time? Because idols tend to preoccupy our minds, right? We think a lot about them. So which ones do you think about most? Just check all that apply. Okay? Next question. Which one or ones do you fear losing the most? Like, what do you feel like it's hard to imagine being happy if you didn't have this? Just check that on the list. If you have to check one again, just go for it. Next question. Which of these idols gives you a sense of identity? Check the ones that make you feel like you're somebody if you have it. Even if you don't have it, but you're pursuing it, but you feel like you'd be somebody if you had it. Just check that. Next question. Which one do you most want to be known for? Like if it's your reputation, if people had your name and then something be like a blank underneath, what do you want to be known for? Which one of these might go in that for you? Next question. Which one of these do you sacrifice the most for? Like you give up a whole lot pursuing this. Just check whichever one applies. And then one more question. Which one of these do you think people who know you well would say is your idol? Like you gotta be honest here because they know you, your friends, your family, people that live with you. Like who, if they saw your life, they would say, oh, that one's yours or those are yours. Just check whatever applies to that. Everybody got their list? Got your checks? Now we're gonna hand the paper to the person next to you, we're gonna score them, okay? Now we're not gonna do that, don't worry, we're not gonna do that, you don't have to do that. But just pause, take a look at your list, just look at it right now, just stare at it for a second. Look at what has the most check marks. I don't know your story, I don't know what God's doing in your life, but here's my assumption, here's my guess. That is what's keeping you from experiencing the freedom God has for you. And let me be clear, the enemy doesn't want you to see this. He wants you to focus back on the little bits of your behavior management that you work on during the week. He doesn't want you looking for the idol. Because when you've got an idol at the center of your life, you will not be free. The idol has you. Which brings me to one more question. One last question with this, I'm gonna close. What is God supposed to do when we break this command? Like, what is God supposed to do? Like, what's God supposed to do? If we were God and we were telling him, like, what's God actually supposed to do when we break this command and turn to idols? Well, I can tell you what the most severe response would be. The most severe response from God would be to simply do nothing. To let us continue to chase our idols, and in doing so, watch us suffer the consequences. And here's the thing, if we are unwilling to listen to him over and over, if we're unwilling to listen to God, God will let you do just that. In fact, in Romans 1, Paul writes that the wrath of God, the judgment of God, is actually giving us over to the lust of our hearts. God doesn't need to punish us for idols. Idols will do that to you. And if you are adamant about it, he will leave you with your idols and the devastation that follows. But thankfully, our God isn't a do-nothing God. God intervenes in several ways. First, God warns us. And you can see in the Bible, in Scripture, he warns the Israelites over and over, you're getting close to an idol, you're getting close to an idol, you're getting close to an idol. In fact, he exiles them out of Israel because of their idolatry, to warn them how serious this is. And maybe today this message is just a little wake-up call, a little warning for you. Hey, God's saying, whispering in your ear, you're leaning in, you're getting close to an idol there. You're getting close to an idol there. God warns us. And then graciously, he doesn't stop there. He begins to woo us back to him with reminders of how much he loves us and how he can satisfy us. And of course, God does this over and over through Scripture as he's continually gracious with Israel, even when they run away from him, and he comes back and he reminds them that he's their God and he loves them still. And God does this work, he does this mercy, sometimes in very severe, difficult, even painful circumstances to help us wake up and see that we've got an idol in our life. I want to tell you a quick story that a former professor of mine told me that's helped me kind of see and understand this in a really profound way. It's a story about a man named Sheldon Van Auken, who wrote a book that some of you know called A Severe Mercy. It's the autobiographical story of Sheldon and his wife, Jean. I have a picture of them. This is Sheldon Van Auken and his wife, Jean. Sheldon actually went by the name Van. That was kind of his nickname. People called him Van. And Gene went by the name Davy. So we'll call him Van and Davy. Van and Davy, they were madly in love. They lived totally and exclusively for each other. In fact, they called their love a shining barrier that nothing could break. In fact, they actually agreed to not have children because they believed that kids would distract them from their love for one another. For Van and Davy, love, their relationship was at the center of their life. Until they met a group of Christians that included this guy, some of you will know, a guy named C.S. Lewis. And they began having conversations about what matters most in life. And Lewis helped them see and understand that real life, real joy could only be found when all of their devotion was fully given over to Jesus. And they made a decision to put their faith in him, and they poured their lives into this newfound faith, but not to the same degree. Davy was all in. She poured herself fully into her new faith, but Van only put kind of a toe in the water. He loved the idea of God, don't get me wrong. He loved the idea of God and the idea of joy and the idea of heaven, but only so much that it supported what mattered most to him, his love for his wife. And eventually, things began to change in their relationship. He felt threatened by his wife's all-out commitment to Jesus because he was no longer at the center. He even began to be resentful of God over her faith. And it was during that time that Davy became ill, got very sick. In fact, she was given a prognosis of only a few months to live. And those final months, she gave herself further and further to Jesus, a beautiful part of her story, until she passed away when she was only about 40 years old. In an attempt to make sense of this horrible tragedy, because Van, he was just devastated, he wrote a series of letters to C.S. Lewis asking him, how could God do this? How could God allow this to happen? And Lewis responded not by saying that God caused her death, because God didn't, but that God in his mercy would use even this tragic loss to woo Van closer to him. And by the way, C.S. Lewis also lost his spouse, so he knew something about losing a loved one too. And as time wore on, Van began to grow in his faith to the point where he began to see just how resentful he had been all along. God had never been at the center of his life, he realized. In fact, in the second half of the book, he imagines what would have happened or what might have happened had his wife actually recovered from her illness. One outcome, he says, would have been that his faith would have grown equal to hers, though he admits that he was light years away from that when she passed. Another outcome, he thought, would have been that he would have tried to weaken her faith in Jesus, like bring her down in jealousy, wanting to restore their love, restore that shining barrier. But he knew she was far too close to Jesus for that to ever happen. So the outcome he imagined most likely, had she actually gotten well, would have been that he would have grown so bitter, so resentful, so broken, he would have turned both against God and his wife. In fact, I want to read you some of the words he wrote in the book about this. With this in mind, he said these words: contemplating these dreadful possibilities, coming to hate my God or coming to hate my dear love, I cry even as I write, no, my God, it could not have happened, never. But if my reasoning is correct, then her death and the dearness of our love had these results. It brought me, as nothing else could do, to end my jealousy of God. And it saved her faith from my assault, which makes it precisely a severe mercy. Now, I'm not saying that sickness or tragedy is God's will. I'm saying that even in our darkest hour, God will use what we're walking through to help us remove the idol, remove the false God, remove the piece of your life that you think you can't live without that's actually killing you, only to woo you back to him because he can sustain you and fulfill you. It's like the father of the prodigal son who allows his son to run to the far country, chasing all those false gods, knowing it's gonna wreck his son's life. But when his son comes back, he realizes he's settled for so much less. He turns for home. The father runs out to meet him, and what does he do? He embraces him, not just to welcome him home, but to remind him there's a love that can sustain you. There's a love that can fill you. There's a love that can complete you if you'll have it. And God wants to give you that all-sustaining, all-fulfilling, all-satisfying love right now. And to prove it to you, when you were far from him, clinging to your idols, God came running into the world in the person of Jesus, and he died on a cross, and he walked out of a tomb to prove that there's no other God like him. No other God who is worthy of worship. No other God who can save. No other God who promises to be faithful. No other God, no other God, no other God, no other God. And friends, he is not asking you to let go of your primary concerns or your peripheral concerns. He's asking you to put him back where he belongs, in the center of your life, as the one who can sustain you and fulfill you. But that means you have to remove the idol. Even if it's a severe mercy. Because only God can live at the center of your life. At the center, it's not God and it's God only. So we're gonna close now with a moment of prayer and worship. And I wanna give you this moment to let you make a decision about the idol in your life right now. So if you would bow your heads for just a moment. And we're not just gonna pray, we're gonna sing. But I wanna prepare you for the words we're gonna sing right now with your eyes closed. The song's about pointing our eyes back to Jesus, looking to him for what we need, the wisdom, the grace, the direction we need. But it only makes sense to sing the song, not as just the song before we go back to our car, the song before we go back to what we're doing, but a posture of removing an idol. God, I look to you and nowhere else, because you are where my help comes from and my hope comes from. So now I want to invite you to stand. Go ahead and stand up. Or if you want, you can kneel, but be in a posture of fully turning your life over to him. And we're going to use this song as our prayer of turning that idol back over to him. So Jesus, receive now the idols we've been carrying. Receive the idols as we look to you and worship you as our God who reigns.
Hey, thanks so much for watching.
Please be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
Yep, and click right here for more content we think you might like.
Seriously.
Click it.
Do it right now. Show them again, Kiki.